not just in Buddhism, but across many traditions. And then within the Buddhist context, there are different styles of doing prostration. So that particular one, when you see, I kind of raise my hands, right? Then here it symbolizes the body or the physical dimension. And then here in front of my throat, it's the speech dimension, the speech aspect. And then here, held in front of the heart, is the heart command. So what that really communicates is my entire being, right? In both physical, verbal, mental, emotional. So this movement, right, connotes, right, this kind of sweeping movement. It connotes to include everyone. Not to like sneakily convert a whole bunch of people, but in my own mind to think of it as this is done not just for myself, but for everyone. And in a way to invite everyone to this. To what? To the entire being, body, speech, and mind. And then you go down to take refuge. Last week we talked about this. To take refuge in the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha, the objects of refuge. So we also talked about that last week. And then when we get up, we think, and may I together again with everyone wake up, get up, become awake. So like I said last week, the purpose of paying homage to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha is so that I may become like you. And so, which is to become awake, to become Buddha. So that's what this prostration we do prostrations. And one Buddhist teacher, Zhongsha Khyentse Rinpoche, he said, it's kind of where Buddhism started. This form, this ritual form made sense. He said, it's conceivable that if Buddhism had started in a different area, different culture, then it might just be like shaking hands. Now, of course, that gets complicated when the statue doesn't stretch out the hand. While I'm at it, maybe, I think many of you probably have been in here many times and just kind of stare at what's here and probably go, oh, it's very nice. And that's about it, right? Actually, just to point out, close to this, in front of this, over there, we have these museum-looking things. And there's a QR code. If you scan, and I think it takes you to a short video clip of me yakking away about what you're seeing here. Okay? But briefly, obviously, the white stone statue here, this is the Buddha. And there's a story to this Buddha statue. This Buddha statue was sent to us when I was just starting this project. I was in Taiwan. One of my friends, who is a Taiwanese Buddhist nun, took me to go meet with one of her friends who was a collector. This businessman who basically collected the equivalent of 2 small museums of Chinese antiques. So at that meeting, my friend said to this collector, Dr. Lai is starting a Buddhist center in the West. It's very hard to start Buddhist centers in the West, not like in Taiwan. She said that. He said, so he needs a statue. There are lots of statues here. Why don't you give him one? So the collector goes, okay. And so he goes, what kind do you want? So I said, well, a seated, Buddha would be a start, And instantly my friend, Venerable Yifa, she goes, no. So, okay. She goes, sit, sit, sit. Buddhists always sitting, sitting, sitting. A standing Buddha. We need to get some things done. That's very much Yifa. She's like, we need to get things done. I said, okay, standing then. So that's how this standing Buddha image. And in some ways, this is also part of like karmic causality, we say. And so karmic causality is also the creation of things that unfold in ways that we enjoy and things that unfold in ways that we don't enjoy. So this might sound like magic, and maybe it is a type of magic, as in we say certain auspicious, positive, desirable causes and conditions were created at the beginning. And because of that, I dare say, the last 15 or so years, Urban Dharma has been fairly active. So, Venerable Yifa's standing Buddha, I believe, has something to do with this. It's if you want to think of it as magic, okay, fine. But in some ways, it's also, you could say, right, like on a subliminal, I can't ever say that word. You know that word, right? Something goes into the minds and the hearts of people, and attitudes change. And real change, in my own experience, happens in that small level that you don't notice. Big changes tend to fizzle out in a day or two, a week or two. It's those little things that are building up and building up and building up, and then comes together, and you suddenly look back and you go, wait, what happened in the last 15 years? Oh, So this is also one area of talking about karma where it can seem kind of magical. But don't count on magic, but don't discount magic. My words, not quoting someone else. So a little too long for actual bumper stickers, but so that's the main Buddha. And then in front of the Buddha, the second image here, this is an image of Kuan Yin. And so the embodiment and expression of compassion. And it's in a Chinese style that comes from, the style, not the statue, comes from like Tang Dynasty, so 7th to 10th century China. And so this is like the active expression of that compassion. Then this mural here was done by an Asheville artist and someone who at one point came here more frequently, and he's thinking of us all the time, but life has gotten busy in a good way, I think. So Ian is not seen here as much. But this mural here, I said to him, I want Deer Park depicted. And the significance of Deer Park is not just any Deer Park, we're talking about Deer Park where the historical Buddha walked to Deer Park. He achieved enlightenment in Bodh Gaya and he walked to Deer Park. in search of his 5 companions that was with him earlier, but then left him when they thought he had given up on the seriousness of getting enlightened. So after he was enlightened, he went looking for these 5 ascetics. And found them, and he said to them, like, I have something to tell you. I finally found what I was looking for. So that principle of the Buddha coming to us. And so you can kind of see the Buddha coming, walking through the woods in Deer Park. I said, give me an abstract deer park. I think he's done an excellent job. If you've not been here in the daytime where sunlight comes in, give yourself a treat. Come in on some daytime. Just sit there on the pew and watch. As the sunlight comes in, and then these little shelves with the 21 taras, even now they make these shadows that adds to the depth. And then if someone walks by, that even gives it more movement on this wall. So it just turned out beautifully. So then, hovering in this forest are the 21 taras. And the 21 taras embody the same principle of wisdom that manifests itself as active reaching out, active compassion. So you have the historical Buddha in the context of a place called Deer Park that you can still go to today. But depicted here is an abstract of that. And then you have the transhistorical taras flying towards you, coming to you. So that's the program here in this wall. These 2 statues here recently arrived. They were offered by a good friend in Malaysia for the Forest Hermitage, the Dharma Hall there. In fact, the main Buddha for the Dharma Hall is already here. Came during Helene. It was quite complicated to try to get the statue because it landed before the hurricane landed. And then we had to go get the statue here. And so Bill Laity saved the day and many other days. Basically drove to Charlotte to go pick up this, a ton or something like that?
2,800 pounds.
Yes. So it's sitting out in the land. And then these 2 are the 2 chief the successors of the Buddha. They were not the chief disciples of the Buddha. The chief disciples of the historical Buddha, both of them died before the Buddha. Yeah, Shariputra and Mongayayana. But the 2 disciples that succeeded him and led the community was the senior one, Mahakashapa, and the junior Ananda. Ananda was the Buddha's cousin and faithful attendant. Mahakashapa was older than the Buddha, but they said that he lived till the age of 120. So he succeeded the Buddha in leading the community after the Buddha. So to have both of them is to emphasize the continuity of the tradition, of the wisdom lineage. Yeah? My goal really is that I am hoping, I'm putting the word out there, for someone to cast 2 more statues along this style and to have the 2 chief nuns as well, which is the Buddha's stepmother, Mahapajapati, was one of them, and the Buddha's former wife, Yashodhara. So the senior and the junior. Because Buddhist cultures, like many other cultures, they didn't care to depict the nuns. So there's no tradition of depicting. But I'm hoping, with technology and everything, it won't be long before we can modify things on the computer and then say, let's create. So anyway, that's the aspiration. So these two, and over there is this Jambala. Jambala, in some ways, his external form is basically a forest spirit, a yaksha, a nature spirit, a forest spirit. But what he represents in Vajrayana, Tibetan Buddhism, is the principle of generosity. So wealth, generosity, and this wealth, of course, the kind of coarse version is like money, but it's way more than that. Because at the same time, we say there's a type of hungry ghost, one of these lower beings, that have great wealth. And when we look around, we know what that means. Yeah, there are some very powerful, wealthy people who are basically hungry ghosts. Yeah, because they can never find satisfaction. So what generosity also is satisfaction. And when there is true satisfaction, there's no longer this hoarding, this holding back. And also no longer not enough, not enough, not enough, not enough, not possible, not possible, not possible. Yeah. Yeah. So this is what we're seeing here. Okay, good. So let's sit down. Take this opportunity. Yeah, thank you. Okay. So once again, we are going to begin with this act of taking refuge, going for refuge in the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha. So if you have read what I suggested that you read for this week, that chapter on bright karma, there's one nice section on puja. So this taking of refuge is one of the key elements in puja. Puja as an act of devotion. And then the role of devotion, the power of devotion. I talked about that a little bit last week. So if you try to recall some of those points that I made, and also what is Buddha, what is Dharma, what is Sangha, try to remember, to recollect those topics. So then bringing those topics to mind, I invite you to listen. If you don't know the words, then those of you who know the words, please join me. In the Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha, most excellent, I take refuge until Bodhi is reached by the merit of generosity and other perfections. May I attain Buddhahood for the sake of wandering beings in the Buddha, Dharma, most excellent, I take refuge until Bodhi is reached by the merit of generosity and other perfections.
attain Buddhahood for the sake of all wandering beings in the Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha. Most excellent, I take refuge until Bodhi is reached by the merit, generosity, and other perfections. May I attain Buddhahood for the sake of all wandering beings. So I want to honor what I said last week, which is we will have some time at the beginning for some questions, especially at the end of last week, somebody on Zoom say, hey, how about some questions? But then I was a wimp, it was getting cold. The apocalypse was coming. And so then I said, no, we got to go now. So now, please think of your questions. And if you are joining us on through Zoom, please type your questions because we have some technical difficulties so that if you speak, we actually can't hear you. So you can type your questions, and then Kurt here will read the questions for me. And then, of course, here too in the room if you have any questions. But before you ask the questions, one final part. The puja, the act of puja, which is an act of devotion, often includes making offerings. So typical offerings include the offerings of light, the offering of flowers, the offering of incense, and the offering of water. Also, you might see the offering of food. So, just briefly, the offering of flowers is the offering of all that is beautiful, but here we're talking about the beauty of the inner qualities. At the same time, especially in Theravada tradition, part of the recitation they use when offering flowers is a reminder of how flowers, as beautiful as they are, they wilt and they die. So it's also a reminder of our condition. The ephemeral nature of all experiences. So we offer flowers. Incense, the offering of incense, of course, on one level is to have a good smell, right? Pleasant. And also incense has the power to calm the mind or make the mind more sharp depending on what kind of incense. So for example, one of my friends just published completed his doctoral dissertation, and he studied a incense making manual from like the 12th century in China. It's about 1,200 pages that he translated of this manual that described every single ingredient that they were using to make incense. And what are the qualities of the ingredient, and then he researched the scientific name, what they are. It's amazing. So sandalwood is said to uplift and sharpen the mind. Then there's this one wood called aloes wood or agar wood, that is said to calm. So especially if you're nervous, and energy is, kind of all over the place, it calms. So often, like Japanese incense will combine those two, and said to be most conducive for meditation, because you want the mind to be bright and awake, but you don't want it to start, to be jittery. So then you want the other effect. Which is the difference between tea and coffee? I drink both. I'm not I thought you were a tea guy. Yes. Also coffee guy. But the difference between tea and coffee, by the way, coffee has caffeine and tea has caffeine. But tea also has what? Tannins. Tannins are relaxant. So tea is consumed in Buddhist cultures to help with not falling asleep during meditation. But not coffee. You might be too awake and too jittery. So tea has that effect of maintaining this balance. So anyway, incense. But the behind the meaning of incense is the fragrance of disciplined conduct, integrity, harmlessness, as the true fragrance that we should exude. So much so that there is belief that certain people who have kind of good disciplined conduct, that their body exudes fragrance. Apparently, there's also a medical condition that causes that. I was reading somewhere. But it doesn't have to be either or, Right? I mean, all we're saying when we say there's a medical condition, all we're saying is like, that's the physiological basis, right? That's the how, not the why. Yeah? Lights, that's definitely universal. Yeah, and in this tradition, light mainly connotes wisdom, clear seeing. Then water is life. Water is also adaptability. And so in fact here with this water, in the Tibetan tradition, there's all these bowls of water, they actually represent different offerings. Water to drink, water to wash, then flowers, light, incense, perfume, food. So it said water can represent other things. So it's talking about adaptability. It's talking about flexibility. So in a different tradition in China, in the Tao Te Ching, it says, be like water. Like that is a how should we best exist in the world? It says, be like water. What does that mean? Water adapts to all situations. And also it says, explicitly in the Tao Te Ching, it says, water always seeks the lowest level. It's like, be like water. It's the ideal way of being in the world. May come as a surprise to some of you, but the Tao Te Ching was also a political text. In fact, most scholars who study that said that it was composed by someone trying to persuade a king. It was a time where China was divided into many, many feuding kingdoms. And so it was also this period called the time of the 100 philosophers. 100 simply means many. And so all these philosophers were going around trying to get a patron, a king, to adopt their way of, running the country. So the Tao Te Ching was a political text in that way. So it's also telling trying to persuade some king. The best way to preserve your country is to lay low. When nobody notices you, nobody would come harass you. And then even saying, and even you as a king, the lesser your people know you exist, the better. Then one figure later on in Chinese history, not that far from when this text was composed, turned this text into a Machiavellian. The less people know you exist, the better. Anyway, water. Yeah? So here, these bowls of water represent all the different things that you would desire, you offer to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha. So also rows of water over there. And so this water is not for you to, sprinkle on yourself. We have seen all kinds of things, maintaining a temple. Yeah, people come in, dip their fingers in each bowl of the water and doing this. No, that's not what we do. Okay, good. Yes,
We do have one question
sure.
so far. This is from Leslie Mantrone. Sorry if I'm butchering your name. I'm conflicted on how to deal with sentient beings such as roaches. I feel badly, dark karma when I kill them. And in the past, when I have tried to live with them, it has become overwhelming and has led to infestation affecting not only me, but others in my building. Your thoughts?
Oh, do your best. Do your best. So I think it's more like maybe you were hoping that I said, don't pay attention to how you feel. Actually, here we say, do pay attention to how you feel. Do pay attention to the darkness of having to kill. Yeah? Because that's a good kind of heaviness to pay attention to. When we stop doing that, that's when we do the next thing and the next thing and the next thing, and we cause so much harm and destruction, and we don't even know how we got there. It's because, right, we ignored. So it's very clear, that it's a type of dark karma, yeah. But we just do the best we can, yeah, in any of these situations. And often, actually, we can do more than we normally think. Often. And so in that scenario, I know there's all the ins and outs, we could spend the whole night troubleshooting that situation. But often it has to do with, I grew up in Southeast Asia. Climate is on the equator, sea level, right? Everything is crawling around all the time. If you think it's easy to have roaches and ants and infestation here, yeah, wait till you get to Southeast Asia. So those of us who have become acquainted with the Buddhist teachings, we have ways of, you wipe, you clean, you don't leave anything out. Right? You don't even have, cookie crumbs. Right? Nothing. You keep things spotlessly clean. Then you don't give them a reason to turn up. Of course, once they turn up, it's like, oh, now what, And even that, it's possible. So So rather than, right, it's all about making improvements rather than, oh, it's okay, just squish them all, right? You go, right? And see what happens, right? And if you come to the point of you have to squish, you know you have done all the things that you try to do, you know. Here is one story. And it's not an easy answer or a simple answer or a direct answer. Huh? But here these stories, you know. So here's a story. The Buddha once a butcher came and listened to the Buddha teach. And he was very taken by what the Buddha taught. Right? So then he wanted to put into practice what the Buddha taught. Then before long, of course, he came to the Buddha and confessed. He said, I'm a butcher by profession. And I have a family to support. Buddha said, okay, well, how about this? Is it possible that you not slaughter in the morning? Keep it to only in the afternoon? He said, well, I could talk to people and see if I could change my schedule that way. Buddha said, yeah, so that's good. And so he did that. And over time, you know, it became like less days of the week. This story actually, if I remember it, didn't end with he stopped being a butcher because his situation he could not. But the Buddha said, putting some effort into limiting the harm that you're causing, even if you, I mean, some of us are, right, very like, you know, well, the sum total is still 49, you know, goats that he would kill. Now it's all in the afternoon instead of morning, right? But it does make a difference. And the Buddha takes the long view. What's the long view? Not just this lifetime. Not just this lifetime. Not just this week. Not just this month. Not just the next 4 years. Take the long view. Elsewhere it says, practice as if your hair has caught on fire. But that statement is given within a broader understanding of 3 incalculable eons to become enlightened. This is related to how we understand the issue of karma. There's an aspect of karma where it's from moment to moment, and that's mainly the way this book emphasizes. But what this book emphasizes is not separated from that other view of many, many lifetimes. Yeah? So you have to hold both of them together. And of course, if you're just using kind of linear thinking and that very, you know, logical in that way kind of mind, then you're like, well, it doesn't add up. Right? But there are no straight lines in nature. Doesn't mean you can't draw straight lines. Just know that in nature there are no straight lines. Yeah? Life is way more complex and interesting than either or. Usually one question would give rise to more questions. So yes, in the temple, yeah.
So if somebody in your family, say a relative, has created some very, very serious sins,
Uh-huh.
let's say killed many people,
Yes.
what is your relationship to their karma?
Right. So the question is, if somebody in your family has created some very heavy negative karma, what is your relationship to the person or to the person's karma? The person's karma. No direct relationship. So it cannot be that they created the karma and you got affected by that karma. I say no direct, right? Now, you may have your own karmic baggage, which because of someone close to you creating negative karma, it's sort of like, okay, let me use an analogy. Yeah? Someone started a fire, right? A bad fire. So the first thing you have to look is, am I carrying around, canisters of gasoline? If I am, better stay away. But if you do catch on fire, it's not because somebody else started that fire. It's because you have gasoline all over you. Does that make sense? Yeah. So we don't inherit other people's karma. But for example, being born in the same family, you have a particular karmic pattern that led you to being with this group of people, not just family, but neighborhood, and all of that. Then you are predisposed to certain ways of behaving and certain ways of reacting and certain ways of acting. Predisposed. And the more we develop, and here is the main point, and the emphasis of this book that I'm encouraging you to read, it's that the more you develop your mind, your heart now, the more you are able to be aware. Oh, yes, I'm walking around with gasoline. I probably should not go to LA now. Stay away. So you can begin to shape, right? What's going to happen? Not an easy thing, but far from impossible. Some cultures that have received Buddhist teachings have developed these ideas of like inherited karma. Like say in China, where the family emphasis is so strong because of Confucianism. Then some Chinese Buddhists talk about like inheriting like grandpa, grandma's karma. But the Buddha will say, no, it's a misunderstanding. Yes, it seems like, right? So then we can say, for example, right? Genetically, you are predisposed to having diabetes, right? But you can't blame it on because I got the genes of my grandparents. That is, again, back to, that is just the how, not the why. The why is you. The how may be provided by circumstance and conditions. So we also talk about causes and conditions. If there are only causes but no contributing conditions, then it will not happen. And if there are contributing conditions but no causes, it also will not happen. But when causes and conditions come together, then past karma, whether from a minute ago or a lifetime ago, will ripen. Yeah. There is a lot of agricultural metaphors, especially karma in Buddhist. When the Buddha taught about karma, he used a lot of agricultural terms and understandings. In particular, I recently came across this study that showed how, in particular, it had to do with rice cultivation in the Buddha's area where he lived, where he was born. So all this discussion about ripening is really from this rice cultivating culture. And so when you are growing rice, your biggest enemy is wild rice, not the type that you go to Whole Foods and pay $20 for half a pound. This is basically another type of wild rice where you can't eat, but they spread very fast. So the minute they fall on the ground, it's almost like kudzu, They can grow like 2 inches each day. And so then being careful about not letting these other seeds hit the ground also becomes kind of the metaphor for how to cultivate the mind. So back to, I talked about how the word meditation, bhavana, was also an agricultural term, which is to cultivate. So in cultivating the mind, in cultivating our heart, you go about it like a rice cultivator would cultivate land. Watch out for the weeds. Watch out for wild rice. And wild rice, the thing is, resembles what you want, but it's not. So much of, and that is so illustrative of the problem at hand. It looks like what we want, but it's actually not. It's an imposter. And once it hits the ground, it takes over. And then you're overpowered. So my raised beds lasted 2 seasons. Now it's a patio. I give up. A patio with a pizza oven on the one side and the incense burner on the other side. My samsara and nirvana, and caught in between is sitting in the patio. Didn't plan it that way, but that was how it unfolded, my backyard. Funny thing, it was during the pandemic that I got rid of the raised beds and turned it into a patio. Recruited my godkids who were then 6 and 8 to help me build the patio. It's character building. Other questions? Yes.
I'd like to ask about Vedana, about pleasant, unpleasant
Uh-huh. Yes.
Because I think that your explanation launched, I think I have an understanding of a part of my practice that has been working. I have practiced a very long time. That I didn't understand. You said that with contact, pleasant or unpleasant or neutral arise immediately.
Yes.
Precognition.
Yes.
Precognition, you said.
Yes.
So I'm going to give a simple example.
Yes.
When you see a dog and you've been bitten by dogs.
Yes.
The contact with that sight
Yes.
is very unpleasant.
Yes.
If you do a lot of therapy,
Yes.
then you see a dog
Yes.
over time,
Right.
the contact can become neutral.
Yes.
So the Vedana changed.
Yes.
What also changes is the tension in the body.
Yes.
Earth, water, fire, and air.
Yes.
Your body becomes relaxed
Yes.
as Vedana changes
Yes.
from unpleasant to neutral.
Correct.
Is that correct?
Correct.
Because this
Yes,
is what
yes.
the kind of way I've been doing therapy with mindfulness has changed my body.
Sure.
And changed
Yeah.
the amount of unpleasant Vedana.
Yes.
So I finally understand.
Good. Wonderful. Now write that down.
I did write it down, so there's a relationship between Vedana and earth, water, fire, and air in the body when they get out of
So write that down, send it to me, I'll send it to everyone. Yes.
Because I have not understood this, and many teachers do not understand.
Yes.
They just tell me, you don't need to do therapy if you're practicing correctly. And I say, but it is changing my practice.
Yes.
It is
Yes.
working.
Yes.
So I finally withdrew from many Buddhist centers
Uh-huh.
because they don't understand
Uh-huh.
how therapy can work.
Right. 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 Yeah. Go to therapy, and
If you need to.
yeah.
Only
Yeah. If you need to, and also sometimes it takes more than once to find the right person. Yeah. So all of that, right? But this is a multi-dimensional work, you know. So then suddenly, I think then your Dharma practice, instead of feeding, right, a pattern that your Dharma teachers might not understand is there. Because here's the thing too, right, to be fair, often when people, at least in my experience, when people turn up in front of a Dharma teacher, it's like going to the dentist. So what happens? You start flossing and brushing after every meal, just for the heck of it, in between meals, because you know you have a dental appointment, right? And we want to please the dentist. So what can the dentist do, you know? But go, well, everything looks good. Now, of course, in reality, the dentist knows. Because there's evidence in there. No matter how you try to clean up, right? So the analogy is not that good, but there's some of that going on. So the Dharma teacher don't really see, right, how messy we are. Because part of it's true. Part of why we go to a Buddhist center, I'm not talking about you, but my own experience is we also feel like, oh, I like this club. I've talked about this, right? And so I want to belong to this cool club. So I have to like clean up my act. But in a superficial way, we've been trying to clean up the act. Yeah, so we don't show. Now, having said that, even sometimes when you show your messiness, again, because the teacher, two possibilities. Either the teacher comes from a different culture, so suffering is still suffering, but the way suffering comes out is different. So if the teacher comes from a different culture and is not attuned to, I know some teachers who completely just landed from Mars, I mean, for all intents and purposes, but because they are so profoundly present and clear They can cut through all the culture and they know. Very rare. But I have met some of these individuals. But they're like stars in the daytime, So don't walk around hoping or thinking that every teacher you're going to meet is like that. Right? Don't count on magic, don't discount magic, right? But by and large, you have either a teacher who's from another culture, right? It's not realistic for you to project and think, oh, they know everything. Right? The other scenario, the teacher is from this culture, all of that, but because they converted to Buddhism. So then they also stop going to regular doctors, stop eating with fork and spoons, maybe even starting to speak English with a strange accent. You think I'm joking? I've met people. Yes, no, really. They have gone native. Right? So then they throw out everything and poo-poo some very useful things within our culture, within this culture, So anyway, quickly summarize. This was about, last week I talked about, so the Buddha's explanation of what takes place when our mind, just simplify it to just as if it's one thing, but footnote is not a thing, it's a process. Yeah. But let's just say mind. When the mind comes into contact with an object, and how does the mind do that? The mind does it through the physical senses. So what the 5 different physical senses actually allows the mind to experience is particular to each of the senses, right? So the eye doesn't see smell. The eye sees shapes and colors. And so on and so forth. So when the eye comes into contact, so the first moment of contact with an object of the eye, of eye consciousness, that's how the Buddha would speak of it, immediately, so that contact gives rise to what's translated as feeling, but it's really, now the translation I've seen is like a feeling tone, a sensation tone. It's a tone. It's not feeling like, what you write songs about. How you're feeling and complicated feelings. Not that. That's further down the road of experience unfolding. In the first moment, it's called Vedana, and Vedana is this, and it's said that when contact takes place, then Vedana arises. But the way Vedana arises is precognitive. And what arises in that first moment is pain, pleasure, or neutral feeling. Then in relation to pain, then you give rise to like. In relation to pleasure, in relation to pain, dislike. Well, maybe some of you. And then in relation to, pleasure is like. In relation to neutral is, I don't care, one way or the other. And so, seeing that, so Vedana is precognitive, and that's why, bad news, it can feel so hard to change. But good news, in the case that you just shared with us, and I know if you're out in Zoom land, maybe you could not hear everything, so we're going to get that written down and we'll send to all of you that if you're registered. It was a wonderful story on how Buddha also said, the thing is, although Vedana is precognitive, but it's not set in stone. You can change what kind of Vedana arises in relation to what. You don't have to get stuck in that. And our friend here shared with us how combining that with effective therapy can change this whole mix in ways that if you do this separately, you may not get this result so quickly. Yes, so speaking of dogs, so you use the example of a dog, because you've been bitten by a dog, so then in a precognitive way, immediately when you see a dog, right, it triggers this fear, this painful experience. And you even have stories of people, and this is where past lifetimes come into play. We say it's precognitive. Just you see a dog, you've never been beaten by a dog, this lifetime. But immediately there is a colleague of mine many years ago, and I digress, but this is kind of to show, the power of this precognitive response. She was somewhere, I don't know, South America or Southeast Asia, and they were going on to some river excursion, and they got onto this boat, a simple rickety boat. A bunch of people got in there, and there was further down. I mean, in a safe. I mean, they were getting on the boat, and the people leading them was like, quickly, be careful. Why? Because either it was a crocodile or alligator is lurking. So they got to quickly get on the boat. And this woman got onto the boat, and then a dog that belonged to one of the boat guys came onto the boat. This woman rushed out of the boat, even knowing there's a crocodile or alligator. It's precognitive, it's no logic. The fear of the dog is greater than the fear of the crocodile. Until the next life, yes. And then crocodile enters the picture, right. Yeah. So, anyway, this chapter, right, chapter 2, I want to read some of the parts, yeah. So in the first part of chapter 2, it talks about bright and dark karma, the way that it arises, they arise from the heart. So there, Ajahn Sucitto talks about, well, he gave the example, and these are edited talks that he had given at different places. So it wasn't written as a book, but a very skillful editor brought together this theme. And then I'm sure they did some revisions, and then this is the book, right? But he talked about how a group of people have gathered to help make a Buddha statue, and how beautiful, that activity is, how that just gladdens the heart, how that kind of activity brightens the heart. So anyway, on page 44, bright karma is the term used in the scriptures to denote good action or that which leads to positive results. This is not a theory or a legal judgment. And so this is really important, especially the thing about legal judgment. Because so much of I think many of our experience with religion uses these legalistic and almost like force and fear and rewards and punishment. Yeah. Here, even though you could create a legal system out of this kind of belief. And in Asia, various governments, emperors, kings, whatever, throughout history have co-opted these teachings, and in some ways I would say pervert these teachings. Not necessarily even out of ill intent, but they thought that's an easy way to keep people in line. Again, I'm not even saying that they were up to no good, but nonetheless, you can kind of pervert this. Not out of ill intent even, but nonetheless it's a perversion of what the Buddha taught. Yeah? And kind of present karma as an issue of law. You have been good, so you're rewarded. You've been bad. So I think like many Buddhist teachers, like Buddhist teachers are unaware that when you say to someone, oh, that's bad karma ripening, often, if you're in the West, that statement has to be said in very carefully, because most people will hear it as, I deserve this. And then now, right, suddenly we turn into 4-year-olds and traumatize 4-year-olds. But when the Buddha says this is your negative karma ripening, you know what he's also saying? He's not only saying this is the result of a cause that was created in the past. And so first point is, of course, it's not no rhyme or reason. No rhyme or no reason, right? There is meaning in this world. We don't live in a haphazard world where things just happen. And so there is cause and result. So yes, he's saying that. And that, of course, can have certain undertones, overtones of like, well, you deserve it, right? But that's not the point. The point is cause and effect. Pointing that out. That you're living in a world where there is a natural unfolding of things that if you understand the principle, then you're not, at the very least, you're not walking around going, what? Why? Okay? So that's one thing it's saying. But the other thing also, I think, when it said that is the ripening of a negative karma, it's also saying what? Done. Finish. As in, yeah, that negative has now ripened. You can be done with it now. You can be done with it now. But then the next thing he's also saying is, however, when it ripens, right, when it ripens, what happens is, if you're not careful, you'll make more of it. He's also saying that. He's also saying that. So all of that is in that statement. This is negative karma ripening. So this is not a theory or a legal judgment. If you linger, so here, this is what I like about this book. If you linger in the heart behind skillful actions, you can feel a bright, uplifting tone. So don't take this as an article of faith, but investigate this. Pay attention. Because sometimes you have to tease out this bright, uplifting tone. Because our habits have been such that we have covered over it. So knowing this helps. That you tease it out. And the more you tease it out, the more you become sensitized to the bright and dark qualities of your actions, including your reactions. And more importantly, here is also why bright or uplifting karma is so important. Not only because it brings the happiness that you and I want, okay? Not just that. More so, bright karma is steady and it imparts clarity. It has an energy that's conducive to meditation. In other words, so meditation is a big word, meditation. Literally. But, in other words, the work of the heart. The reprogramming of our behavior, of our patterns, of our habits. If you're interested in that work, then you need the help of bright karma. Bright karma is steady and imparts clarity. Here's the catch-22. Of course, you're like, well, I don't have enough bright karma. That's why I'm feeling this way. And now you tell me I need to have, right? Well, sorry, that's the bad news. But it's also the good news. As in, if you feed this particular cycle enough, it builds up its own momentum. So then the biggest challenge, of course, now is how do I yank myself out of the other pattern? And for us, card-carrying Buddhists, that's the devotion. And again, catch-22. Well, that's the problem. I don't have that. That's why samsara literally means the round. Chasing that again and again and again and again. When it's going good, it's good. When it's not going your way, it seems like there's no escape. But there is. Yeah? So here. Dark karma, on the other hand, lacks clarity and feels corrosive, as it makes the heart feel so unpleasant. So this is how karma is related to the work of meditation, the work of cultivating the heart mind. As it makes the heart feel so unpleasant, then what happens? Attention doesn't want to go there. The heart gets jittery and distracts instead. So attention wants to be somewhere else. Meditation is challenging if you're feeling unpleasant. If the body is not feeling good. And so sometimes, like we think, if only I get the right technique. No, it's not about technique. It's about understanding. And to instigate this bright karma is not so difficult. Because in some ways, right, going back to how our innate nature is clear, is pure, okay? Going back to that. So what that means also is actually, We are more inclined to do things that are bright than dark, actually. So in fact, we do more of that. But what's the problem? We don't look at what we have done. We don't pay attention. You know, we don't see the bright quality and go, ah. And some of it may be cultural, right? But also the thing about, don't dwell on the good that you have done. As if it's some kind of embarrassment. You have to hide it. And if you talk about it, don't talk about it. It's kind of annoying. But you know, if you like even yourself entertain, oh, that was a good thing I did, right? Then there's another voice that's like, bad. You gotta give that up. And so they say, when you find that you've done something good, you're like, okay, time for a treat. Chocolate. That's good. I've been good today. Chocolate. Or go to the sauna house. So this is something to check inwardly. Can we rest and comfortably bear witness to the heart behind our actions? So here, heart is what he translates the Pali or the Sanskrit chitta. One quality of mind or one function of mind is called chitta. Another function of mind is called manas. Remember the distinction that he makes, right? Manas, he says, is more about collecting those contact and experiences. Chitta is where you would say, there are actually very interesting nuances that Ajahn Sucitto is making, but for our purposes, I'm sorry that I have to kind of simplify it too. And I think, not simplifying because I think you're not deep enough to get it, but I think that's where we begin. We begin at the level that we can more directly relate to. Then later you can plumb into the depths that he actually offers. So here I think suffice to say, see that, in this thing that we just generally call mind, right, or consciousness, there are at least two functions. One is more like just gathering, like input. And the heart, so that is the manas, which is what we call mind, or the intellect. No, mind. So that gathers. Then it's the heart that engages what is being gathered with certain tones and certain qualities. And therefore, it's the heart that we want to guard and protect and safeguard and train. Yeah? The eyes that sees, the nose that smells, the ears that hear, that is relatively unproblematic. The heart that stirs when the eye sees, when the ear hears, when the tongue tastes, the heart that responds, that we have to pay attention to. And so here, can we rest and comfortably bear witness to the heart behind our actions? Do our thoughts, right? He says, do our thoughts and impulses come from a bright or dark state? Even in the case of owning up to some painful truth about our actions, isn't there a brightness, a certain dignity when we do that willingly? Yeah. So this painful truth about our actions can even gain a quality of brightness. Yeah? If we go there willingly and go there and know that I will make a difference when I go there willingly and skillfully. So the energy of karma originates in the heart. And so here he gives a definition, chitta. It can move out through body and speech and mind, manas. Manas refers to the mental organ that focuses on the input of any of the senses. So manas defines and articulates. It scans the other senses and translates them into perceptions and concepts. Tonally, it is quite neutral. It is not happy or sad in itself, it just defines. Yeah? It's like the side that has no judgment, I'm just stating the facts. You like, you don't like, I'm just stating the facts. I'm just recording what's going on. Then chitta, on the other hand, is the awareness that receives the impressions that attention has brought to it. It is affected and responds. It adds pleasure and pain to the perceptions that manas delivers. And these effects generate mind states of varying degrees of happiness and unhappiness. And this is what I call the heart. In this book, he tells us that. Particularly in this chapter, I find that section on attention really helpful. The skills of attention. So on page 53. On page 53. Here he says, this comes after the section on like the beauty of puja, the function of puja, devotion. And in doing that puja, you recollect the qualities of the Buddha that you admire. And as I said, like you not just admire and you say, these are the qualities that I want for myself. And the Dharma as not just a bunch of information and concepts, but things, words that we are willing. Words, Dharma at first are just words of the Buddha that we are willing to investigate. Not debate, actually, not philosophize, but investigate with the heart. A degree of intellectual engagement is necessary, of course. But that's just like, going to the market to buy the food. You still have to cook it to eat it. And that's the taking to heart, willing to investigate in that way. Investigate with what? With your experience. And he says, recollection of Sangha reminds us that although there is greed, anger, and confusion in the human world, this is the three poisons, greed, anger, and confusion, there are also people who cultivate a way out of that. Not just someone like the Buddha, who is so perfect and now so gone, so to say. As a historical person, so gone. But Buddhahood as a principle is never gone. But to know, to be aware, and to understand that, but there are many others who are cultivating a way out of this mess, gives us confidence, gives us assurance. That we can also be among these individuals. And then the next section is called the skills of attention. Then he says, obviously, there's a lot more to anyone's life than just doing puja. the what and the how of experience. Okay, so there's more to life than doing puja, but such ritual does support training in attention. So puja is a good support for training in attention. So let's look at how attention is an important ability to cultivate. So here, whatever attention has focus on leads the mind and affects the heart. So whatever attention has focus on, manas goes there. And once manas goes there and collect that information, then chitta gets affected, affects the heart. How we attend selects what we notice. How we attend, how we place our attention selects what we notice. And what we notice affects how we attend. Again, that cyclical nature. And that determines where the mind, the manas, will go again. And what action will ensue from there.
Can you give an example of that?
I don't know if I can give a good example, but I think here it's saying, right? So let's say this room, right? On the one level, I'm aware of, there's everyone here, right? Then, if I turn my attention, right, to that empty seat, right? So then, how we attend selects what we notice. So the how here has to do, I think, more with like, why is it that I notice the empty rather than the filled seats? Right? Then that already begins to shape what kind of like information or speculation that I would engage in seeing that seat being empty. Yeah? And then from there, right, meaning gets created. Then the heart either responds with pleasant or unpleasant, more, wanting more or wanting less. Right?
I think you should train your mind to focus on the good things.
Well, let's see. Let's see. Yeah, it's not. No, it's a lot more subtle and exciting and interesting, I think. Yeah. Not complicated, necessarily. In detail, now he says, let's flesh this out. He says, let's flesh this out. An underlying intention steers what attention selects. An underlying intention steers what attention selects. So now we go to intention I tell you, karma is mainly about intention. That's how karma gets created. Right? So me sitting here, right? And someone leaves. Some people sitting here will not notice. Me, I will notice. That tells us my intention is insecure. Oh, what did I say? Yeah? Oh, should I wrap it up soon? All of that. It's neither good nor bad. We're not even talking about, focus on the good or the bad. That's further down the road. Here we want to understand, right? Really, I'm sure there are some who sit here and give their talk and would never notice like half the room has left. Is that good or bad? Who knows, right? The other half is just too polite to get up, right? And they're all stuck and they're suffering. So it's not always bad, right? That I'm insecure.
Good for the speaker.
Yeah, so an underlying intention steers what attention selects. There's so many things that could take my attention. But no, it's that one person that leaves, right? And through the twofold process of contact, a mind state is born that sends out a train of thought. The twofold process, he earlier describes what happens when contact occurs. We don't have time to, you should really, I'm encouraging people, read the book, but don't read it like, cover to cover. It's not that kind of book. Yeah? It's almost like even just open and read a little bit and put it aside. Yeah. But here, important is like, so through the process of contact, a mind state is born that sends out a train of thought. Then then the story goes, For example, an architect sees a house and notices the design and structure. A burglar sees it and notices the windows and doors. Even if the architect and the burglar don't follow through with physical action, their hearts will have been aroused in certain ways, and their minds will have considered and calculated. This mental process conditions their behavior and even who they experience themselves as being. And that reinforces architect, burglar. Yeah. But we often, only become aware enough when we have arrived at burglar. And then we come to believe that there is something unchangeable about being burglar. Then we start to believe that this is who I am. When everything is just so fragile all along the way. Yeah, so an architect sees a house and notices the design and the structure. That comes from a certain habit pattern. And that habit pattern reinforces the identity of an architect, whether with or without the word architect. The mental process conditions their behavior and even who they experience themselves as being in abstract. Underlying intention steers attention. Now he comes back to this. Underlying intention steers, pulls your attention. Attention then gives rise to contact. And contact generates meanings and therefore intention. That's cyclical. Now it has further fed that intention, right? Intention, attention, and contact are all sankhara, formations. Sankhara means formations. That's one aspect of the mind. It's always forming, shaping. These are also translated as volitional activities. They lay down or strengthen a track of mental karma. And with that, the sense of I am is born and reinforced and continuously reinforced. So deep attention arises with the intention to consider how a perception of the scenario is affecting the heart, the citta. Rather than just reacting to sense contact, you listen more deeply and sift through the flood of interpretations or digressions with an attention that looks into whether the sight, sound, or thought, and so on, is useful or relevant, what the arousing or threatening feature of it is, and whether that sign is to be followed or not. Whereas untrained attention is like a bird that rapidly picks up any crumb and hastily moves on to the next crumb. That's untrained attention. Deep attention is like a baleen whale that, while steering towards food, allows the ocean to pass through its mouth. Catching edible krill in its baleen and letting everything else pass. This kind of attention is not judgmental, but it filters and gets to the point, and thus moderates the psychologies that direct your life. This process, when you see this process, it reveals underlying biases, such as gratification impulses or impressions of being threatened. And it may also reveal unquestioned assumptions that program how we think and what we think about. So if deep attention is strong, we can put analysis and further action on hold. We don't try to fix things. We don't go spasming into an opinion about ourselves based on that survey. Many of us have this endless judgment on ourselves. And then it gets worse because you're spiritual. Makes no difference whether you're beating yourself with the crucifix, or with one of these exotic objects here. Still beating yourself. I mean, maybe more exotic so you don't look like your relatives. That's a whole other. That's where the therapist is needed. So if deep attention is strong, we can put analysis and further action on hold. We don't try to fix things. We don't need to go berserk, right? Into an opinion of who you are based on that. And the simple beauty of this process is that when we suspend the reactions of what we assume we should or shouldn't be feeling, again, because of the curse of being spiritual, there is clarity and spaciousness. That gives room for compassion and dispassion to arise. That's it tonight. Good? So, there's so much, The third part of this book talks about, this chapter talks about the benefits of recollecting those teachings. And he highlights a number of topics to recollect, including the fact that we all will die. The Dhammapada says, the only people who fight and argue and, get into all sorts of, conflict with other people are people who mostly forget that we are going to die. Do you know you're going to die? And that's what you've chosen to do? Yeah, I'm not downplaying very real conflicts happening in the world. It's not as simple as that. I also, when people say, oh, we should all just hug. No. The world has very complicated problems. Yeah. Here I'm not extending this to like the ceasefire, That's such a complex problem there. So don't overextend this. Start with you right now. Every time you want to start a fight, just be wise and go, yeah, I'm going to die. No, that's okay. And depend on what fights you pick, you might die faster also. Yeah, so to skillfully engage this truth that we are going to die is helpful. Then another topic he says, to also contemplate, recollect what's known as the body is unclean. And then he says, okay, be careful here. So he knows, we have a lot of hate of the body, That's not what the Buddha is teaching us. But he's teaching us to really look at this body and not let your sense of who you are, your self-worth and all of that be stuck on this body. And when you know that, it's liberating. It doesn't mean don't take care of your health. But it does mean that you begin to have a different relationship with this body. One that frees you. The body is subject to pain, subject to decay. See that. But are you or are you not? Well, it depends on how you train. Subject to pain and decay. So anyway, it's a wonderful chapter. There one part he also talks about how when there is darkness in the heart, that's when you practice bright karma and ending karma. So that's the good news about dark karma. When it has turned up, not karma in the sense of cause, but karma here in the sense of effect. When suffering has turned up. That's when you practice bright karma and ending karma. You don't have to figure out where the dissonance comes from and whose fault it is. All you need to know that this is dark result. This is dark vipaka. And where it gets cleared. It gets cleared in your heart, not out there. The process is like cleaning dirty laundry. It's done both by the action of placing the laundry in the basin and swishing it around, and without action because the water does the cleaning. So you take the dark residue and put it into the clarity or purity that skillful attention brings into play, and the dirt will begin to clear. So, finally, there's also one part in this chapter where he says, now be careful. Don't let something like this become yet another building up of an image of who you think you are, who you think you should be, and all of that. Very distracting. Takes up too much energy. So this issue of self-view is why the Buddha said it's the bearer of suffering. whatever self-view you have, some form of suffering would land on it. When you don't have self-view anymore, then no more suffering, because it has no place to land. This is not yet talking about altruism, okay? Leave that alone, because that also then becomes like, I'm altruistic. Self-view. So let's take a brief moment in conclusion. Now think, whatever good, whatever brightness you experience tonight with us all here together, and you think, oh, if I experienced that, perhaps other people did too. Then we say, bring that all together and say, I will dedicate this to everybody else that exists. Whether they know or they do not know, this is probably what they are looking for. I'm not talking about my talk, okay? I'm talking about that brightness that you experience. So then you think, may they experience this brightness. On the basis of me experiencing some of this brightness, may they too experience this brightness. And then in experiencing that brightness in their lives, may they illuminate the lives of others around them. This is a form of prayer. This is a form, we call it dedication. But the dedication will not have any power unless you cannot dedicate something that you don't have. But if it is something that you do have, then it becomes effective, then it can be dedicated. And it should be dedicated. Okay, thank you for coming tonight. If you can give us a hand and put things away, then we can all go home sooner rather than later.
Thank you.
Yeah. Bye-bye. Hi, Prabhat.